But I wanted to ask you about this Greenpeace. This is a pretty big judgment. It may eliminate Greenpeace. It's such a huge judgment. So Greenpeace has been found liable for millions in damages over the pipeline protests. This is the North Dakota pipeline. Everyone may remember it, the Dakota Access Oil Pipeline. It was a very high-profile protest at the time. And it was a jury trial that was brought by this Energy Transfer, it's called. It's a Dallas-based company. So this 9-person jury awarded Energy Transfer, this energy company out of Dallas, and its subsidiary, Dakota Access, more than $650 million in damages. Then that's levied against Greenpeace International, okay? Now, they're based in the Netherlands, and there's also a USA-based part of them as well, as I'm seeing. And they're calling them guilty of defamation, trespassing, nuisance, civil conspiracy, and other acts. And I'm sure they'll appeal, but it is an extraordinary judgment. As I say, it may literally end Greenpeace because it's such a huge judgment, $650 million. Can you speak to this?
Well, we're now in the era of boycotting law firms, and government action against law firms I don't agree with. But certainly private boycotts of law firms, no one has to hire a particular law firm. The city of LA and the state of California don't have to hire any particular law firm as long as they do it in a legal way. LA's largest law firm, Gibson, Dunn and Crutcher. This Gibson, Dunn and Crutcher is the one representing this energy company. Gibson, Dunn and Crutcher, which does all this business with the state of California, the city of LA, all of that, represent loads and loads of people here in Southern California, took on this case of this Dallas company against Greenpeace. And I think it's just terrible. They tell recruits, you ought to come to this huge national law firm, Gibson, Dunn and Crutcher. We're terrific. And then they take this piece of business. Gibson, Dunn and Crutcher needed the money so bad to take up this piece of business and cripple Greenpeace. So I think it's terrible. And to show my own partisan feelings, I'm a contributor to Greenpeace, and I agree very much with the things that they've done. Now, supposedly, they helped instigate or train this use of free speech. And you might say, well, how come they don't have a SLAPP suit? Because here in California and in many other states, Mark, we have what we call a SLAPP, SLAPP suit. And it says, you're trying to hurt me or financially ruin me as an individual or as a company because I'm exercising my First Amendment rights. So people are asking, well, why didn't they invoke this in North Dakota? And guess what? There is no SLAPP suit available to either Greenpeace or some of the other people that they sued there so that they could stop what Gibson, Dunn and Crutcher and this energy company were trying to do to them. So and then on top of that, I've actually been in North Dakota. They treated me just fine. My case went great. The judge was really nice to me in Fargo. Fargo was playing in the Fargo movie theater in downtown Fargo when I was in Fargo. And they didn't even let this case have its venue transferred to Fargo. It's in this smaller town where these demonstrations were held and where supposedly people were inconvenienced. So you have all these people from this community that was inconvenienced and that seemed to have a stake in this, put on the jury, and you'll be shocked, Mark, you're sitting down, right? And they returned this $600 million verdict, these jurors did. And you may say, well, hopefully that'll get thrown out. Well, good luck with the North Dakota appellate courts and good luck going to the US Supreme Court. The only thing that I can say about this is apparently Greenpeace, because it's an international company and they're over there in Europe, I think Europe is they're countersuing in Europe. So I think Greenpeace is trying to sue the energy company. Maybe Gibson, Dunn and Crutcher can come to their defense over in Europe. I'm sure they have a European office. These enormous firms always do. But hopefully they will win against the energy company over there in Europe, where I think the Greenpeace International is trying to get some kind of remedy. But to me, it's just awful. I mean, there's a free speech right. This idea that this company was hurt $600 million worth, I don't buy it. I don't think it's in any kind of clear record. You'd think the appellate courts would do something about it. And the last thing that I want to say is that they not only had this jury where was all these local people who seemed like I don't know. I mean, it seemed to me like they were pretty biased. Why not at least move the case to Fargo and get people who weren't right there in the local community? But on top of that, Mark, they apparently have been they've been kicking this thing around there in that North Dakota court, and that's what just happened. It's terrible, a terrible loss for Greenpeace, and they were not, as I understand it, they didn't instigate, they weren't the impetus behind this. This was the standing something Native Americans, the Indian.
It was Native Americans because it affected Native American land and Native American water. Yeah, exactly. Access to this water. And I just, and I know I'm a tree hugger, and the environment's very important to me, and so this really cuts deep. I feel it's very hard to go up against these companies anyway. They have a lot of lawyers like the distinguished David Katz who are working, in a way that makes it hard to defeat them. And I think of Stephen Donziger. Stephen Donziger was a brilliant lawyer and is a brilliant lawyer who won a record, I want to say it was $9.5 billion in Ecuador against Chevron. And they polluted, Chevron did. I mean, absolutely polluted an entire area. And Donziger went down there and actually did the heavy lifting associated with this case and won. And then Chevron went after him personally and ultimately prevailed in ruining his life. I mean, on what, and we should have him on the show. I mean, he's still around. And here's Calvin Wong, saying Chevron screwed over Donziger on a phony charge and he lost his law license. Yeah, that's exactly right. So taking on these companies has its own cost. That's a lawyer, Donziger, who beat them. He beat Chevron. He got a judgment against them. And then ultimately they beat him. It was like, okay, we'll show you. We're going to ruin your life. And they did.
No, that's a really sad story. And I hope that you do explore it. And we have to also give a shout out for a lot of lawyers like the ones who are taking on the Trump administration right now. I mean, to have the whole law firm blackballed, I just think it's a terrible thing. Just speaking from my own firm, Mark, we've never taken a case where there was an alleged environmental crime. I know a lot of white collar firms. I know about white collar, sort of sludge and pollution and destroying the shoreline and water quality. We've never taken on a case like that. I don't disparage people who decide that that's what's in their economic future. A lot of the so-called white collar firms, that's a great piece of business for them. It's never been a piece of business that I'm going to take.
And I have to say, everybody, I believe, needs an advocate, and we have a system of advocacy, so I'm good with it. But I just see how sad the outcome can often be. And just because you're on it, lawyers at some of the nation's largest law firms are afraid of President Donald Trump. This from Politico. Not just afraid of what his policies might mean for their clients, but now for their own livelihoods, as his attacks on individual firms have left a shocked industry struggling to respond. When Trump first took office in 2017, attorneys at big law firms lent thousands of pro bono hours to legal efforts to stymie the administration's most controversial policies, like the travel ban, restricted entry to the U.S. from certain Muslim-majority countries, and a lot of lawyers donated their time to this effort. So when there were the efforts to overturn the 2020 election and the Capitol riot, Trump became even more of an outcast when it came to the mainstream legal community. But now, as he returns, they suggest in this Politico piece, David Katz, that Trump finds a Washington legal community that is facing a dilemma: keep their heads down and avoid cases that may pit them against the administration, or continuing to represent clients that might anger a president that is increasingly willing to use his power to seek vengeance. Can you speak to this?
Well, yes. I mean, if you're like that firm we talked about the other day, Perkins Coie, and you've represented Boeing and you've had all these huge clients, and then you had some lawyer there that Hillary Clinton thought was wonderful, and so you become Hillary Clinton's lawyer, and then somehow Trump tries to take revenge against the whole law firm. And there's, I think I had the number the other day. I think it's over 1,200 lawyers there. They're a big company. And you can see where 1,170 lawyers are thinking, How can this be happening to me? I'm going to not have a security clearance. I'm going to try to have a meeting with the IRS, and I won't be allowed into the IRS building because it's a federal building. And Trump's view of the unitary executive is that he can bar me from walking into an IRS building because it's part of Trump's unitary executive real estate. So obviously, this is totally unfair. And you see, the thing is, it can't come around again. When the Democrats get power again, which I think they will quite promptly in both houses of Congress and then in the presidency in a couple of years, it can't come around. The Republicans can't be paid in their own coin. We will never bar law firms the way they just barred Democratic law firms. There are some famous right-wing law firms, and it's the rule of law. It's just not right. And so there's not like mutually assured destruction because the Democrats and people of principle will not do that to the right-wing law firms the way that they are now, what's Trump's favorite word? Colluding and conspiring to do these things to liberal, so-called liberal law firms like Perkins Coie. And, to call Perkins Coie or Covington and Burling, the huge Washington, D.C. firm, liberal law firms is such a farce. You have people running around. They're great lawyers. That's how they got to where they are. But these folks are making $4 or $5 million a year, Mark. $4 or $5 million a year each. The top partners at these firms, or even more. They're charging $2,000 an hour. When I first made $200 an hour, my grandmother said to me, "David, what do you do for that kind of money?" So I'm sure their grandmothers are asking them, "What do you do for $2,000 an hour? What do you do for that kind of money at Covington and Burling and at Perkins Coie?" But if you represent Boeing, you represent these big cases. And so that is a real economic lifeline that's being turned off for, they are millionaire partners at these big law firms. But they want to attract other great lawyers, Mark. And so the way they do that, they go to the law students who are graduating at the top of their class and they say, "Come work for our law firm." And they don't normally say, "We represent Musk and we're rolling in money." You'll be able to tell your friends you make even more money than they do because they may represent the cigarette manufacturers, but we represent Musk. They tend not to recruit the top legal graduates with that, but they tell them what great work they do and how they're helping society and so forth. And so they want to have a practice where they are indeed doing pro bono work and helping society. Mark, before we get off the air, and I know you don't have that much time, but can we just talk about the $50 million Starbucks case?
Yeah, definitely. And I'll get to that Godel loophole. I don't know who put that up there, but thank you. But it's we'll get to it in a second. Won't take long to do Godel's loophole. All right. So David Katz, please. Starbucks, huge judgment against Starbucks for serving, I guess it was tea that spilled and it was so hot. This is like a callback. Didn't McDonald's do this dance, a while ago?
There was the famous case against McDonald's, reviled and ridiculed by right-wing media everywhere that, oh my God, the plaintiff's lawyers, they're crazy. You can sue anybody for anything. This lady had really hot coffee and she sued for, I think it was $3 million, back when money was money. And so ultimately, she not only won, but then they settled the case for something less than that. I think, if my facts are right, about $500,000. But she won a larger judgment than that because people appeal. The loser, the company, appeals a case like that and says that this is a violation of the 8th Amendment. It's an excessive fine that's being imposed on me, whether federal court or state court. The Constitution is against excessive fines and that level of punitive damages or that level of award. And you think to yourself, okay, am I going to go all the way through the appellate courts and hold on to my $3 million award if you're the lady with the hot coffee? You think, you know what? There's an amount at which I'll settle. And so they end up settling for the amount of the award. But you got to win the award first, usually, before the other side is willing to settle. So that was the famous hot coffee case. The lady was severely burned. And the coffee, I think you're supposed to drink coffee at 130 degrees or something. And that coffee was heated up to 180 degrees. So it was excessively hot coffee. She was very much injured and scolded. Now, this person ordered a couple of large hot teas, and they were all put in a tray. And then one of those supposedly wasn't fastened properly. And I think the camera showed that. So that was really bad for Starbucks that, the plaintiff had that evidence. And the plaintiff was terribly injured. The coffee tray fell in his lap. He had great harm to his groin, to his genitalia. He had a dysfunction on account of that. I mean, he's entitled to some significant damages, no doubt about it. But whether it's $50 million, that's what, of course, has really caught people's eye, that it just seems like an excessive amount. I think probably what's going to happen is that they'll make a motion to the judge saying it's excessive, trim it down. I think the judge will probably cut it down, and then they'll probably appeal anyway and said even the reduced amount is excessive and it's just too high an award. But it's gotten a lot of talk here in LA. I was just getting coffee the other day, and the barista says to the person next to me, "I put this on tight. Don't worry. I put it on really tight." But people are talking about that case, and then somebody up there says, "I wish I got $50 million. Well, no, not if you had what happened to this guy. You know, the reality of these torts, when you're really injured, people would rather never have the injury than have the money.
Then when you see a judgment like that, right, David Katz, that means there was real damage done, and you do not want that, even for the money. No, it's a real nasty.
And he had to medically prove it. They apparently offered him $3 million at some point, and then as the case, I guess it became clearer and clearer that the plaintiff was going to win, they offered even more money. You can't bring that in front of the jury. You can't say, "Give my client $50 million." After all, they offered him $5 million, and they lowballed him. You can't bring that in. That's the.
That's interesting. You cannot. Okay, you can't reference. Look, they've already kind of tried to tap out on this. Yeah.
Right. So and there's confidentiality, because otherwise people would never try to settle cases, Mark.
I promised that we'd get to it, so let me get to it. Dennis writes, what does Katsadamas think about Goodell's loophole? Goodell claimed the U.S. could become a dictatorship via the Constitution. Yeah, this is this theory that you can. I think he was trying to get his own citizenship, or I don't know what was the design. It was a maybe you can fill me in. This is a loophole in the Constitution. He feels, or I guess this Goodell guy felt, that would allow the U.S. to become a constitutional dictatorship. Can you speak to it at all?
I'm not really familiar with that theory, but I mean, people have pointed out that Hitler won office.
Sure.
I think Mussolini won his first office. Certainly Chavez down in Venezuela, he actually won. This guy Maduro doesn't seem to ever think the election is going to go his way, and he seems to steal them. But Chavez, Mussolini, and Hitler were popular and won. And then, of course, they never had a really fair election after that, because once they were in there, just like the communists, they didn't want to have a fair election where they might be voted out. So, I mean, how are ways that we could have just voted in Trump and lose our rights? Well, he could decide that whether there's a constitutional amendment or not, which he could never get. He's running another time, and he's going to sit there and wait for the Supreme Court to disqualify him. And maybe it'll go state by state, and they'll say the same thing they said in the Colorado case, that one state can't disqualify anybody, and Colorado can't, and New York can't. And before you know it, he's won another term because he's never disqualified, and he's popular at that time. It's also, we could lose our democracy because they could stuff the ballot boxes, which of course people are terribly scared about. He seems to have won. I know you've had guests on that say that no, there really is some doubt about that, but he seems to have won the last time, but he might not win the next time, and have his people stop the vote in different places, disqualify so many people that there weren't fair votes. I don't think that we're going to lose our democracy because the courts will stop doing what they do. I mean, I think the courts have really done well. There's that case, my old friend up in the Bay Area, William Alsup, who voted that you have to he ruled that you have to reinstate all of those people who were wrongly fired. So I think they'll be reinstated. And then, in terms of having all these thugs everywhere, people were so worried after Trump gave all those pardons to people who were dangerous, that he had his own little stormtroopers, his own little brown shirts out there. But I think that's going to come to naught, because they have to go do brown shirt things in states, and the states are going to watch them. Even if the feds are completely asleep at the wheel, even if Kash Patel, turns a blind eye to things that the FBI ought to be investigating and preventing from happening, the states won't. So you got California, New York, Maryland, and all that kind of stuff. If these guys try to do this kind of stuff, I think that, and that was the feature. People said, okay, when Trump's coming to power now, how is it different? He's got both houses of Congress. Said, how is it different? I'm not trying to be dramatic, but how is it different from when like Hitler or Mussolini came to power? And the one thing that they had in both of those countries, Mark, were federal police forces. And so Mussolini and Hitler could really, have the federal law enforcement on their side, and it really supplanted the states. The state didn't have much power. And so I've said this for a long time. We need to up our game in all of these states. We need to, people are fired from the FBI because they worked on the January 6th investigation. They ought to be hired by states like California and New York. We ought to have a Bureau of Investigation in New York and in California, other states like that, that really rival the FBI. And that if there is, conspiracies, if these people start to become brown shirts, that in a legal way, their communications are known and their efforts are thwarted. We haven't had the thing where people like you just attacked in the streets. That became a feature of Nazism,
sure.
where Jews and other people were just attacked in the streets, and there was impunity. And then there was Kristallnacht in 38, where stores were rampaged and vandalized, and they just sat there. Your business rival, who was Gentile, would say, "Oh, isn't that terrible?" Mr. Cohn, Mr. Katz.
You still have that. You still have that in Europe, and some would say even in this country at times, where their response times, for example, on bombings and this kind of thing, can vary based on where the bombing happened, where the crime happened, et cetera.
But the states, Mark, the states can prevent that. California has an ability to monitor everything that happens in California in a way that, I don't know, take some famous state, Saxony, didn't have that ability to stand up to Hitler and Hitler's federal forces that were everywhere. California is a lot stronger in California than the Saxony police were in Saxony. And I think that's what's going to keep America very safe, that you can get in a world of trouble in all these states. And, that's why we have to have state prosecutions, too, because obviously people are really worried that between the almost absolute immunity that the president has and the pardon power, that he can have his minions really be brown shirts. But he can't give state pardons, and he can't stop the state of California, New York, Maryland from spending a lot of money making sure that we are crime-free in the sense of not having brown shirts, not having assaults on people because of their sex identification or because of their race, religion, ethnic group in the streets. And that I think is, we're not going to have, I still think the Republicans are going to get voted out. You watch, year and a half.
All right. You always leave us with something optimistic. I appreciate that. David, thank you. And we love that you're so generous with your time on Thursdays. And we are overdue for a face-to-face. So I will follow up and we will get that organized and on the calendar. All right?
Bring Kim and Albert too. We'll get the whole.
I would love it. That might be a little.
We got to go to that deli in Studio City. We'll get the whole gang. Come on.
The logistics of that might be more complicated, but we'll.
Kim, on your way to Disneyland. Kim, tell us when you're going to Disneyland, and we'll all rendezvous.
Yeah, David Katz, ready for a Disneyland rendezvous on your way, Kim. All right, David Katz, everybody. Thanks, David.
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.